everybody. It's an absolute privilege to be here to recognise the hard work that teachers up and down the country put in. It's not just about, in my view, about Miss O'Connor today, although certainly she is the winner. I think she'd be the first to agree that this is more about representing her profession and the excellence that many teachers, the extra work they put in on a day-to-day basis and the effect they have on their students. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank our sponsors, David McConville Orthodontists, our campaign ambassador, Rory Kavanagh, who's a national school teacher in Donegal. Briefly mention the McWilliam Park Hotel, who are offering a luxury weekend for two. Most importantly, I'd like to thank all the people who nominated their teachers. We received a huge number of nominations around the country. There were over 500 in the end, and it was a very, very difficult choice going through them all, and some very creative entries were in there as well, and I think it's absolutely fantastic, and I think the right person won it, certainly at the secondary school level here today.
So the very first thing I want to say is thanks, lads. This isn't going to turn into an Oscar acceptance speech, but I do genuinely want to thank those of you who nominated me, both the people that I teach here in this building and those who belong to my virtual classroom online. I'm grateful for the award, and I'm very proud of the part my students played in helping me to achieve it. As an English teacher, I always tell you, you can't be using cliches, but you'll allow me one, and the cliche is that I love teaching, and I know that I'm very privileged to have a job that I love. One reason why I love my job is because I believe that teachers can and do make a difference in people's lives, in students' lives. I had a teacher who made all the difference to me. My English teacher's name was Mrs. Freely, and she's the reason that I became a teacher. And one of the things that she taught me, that stayed with me, is that it's okay to be a rebel. And she's not here today because she sadly died last Christmas Eve. It's pretty ironic to me that as I'm receiving this award for Teacher of the Year, I have no idea if I'll have a job in a year's time. As you know, I'm not a permanent member of staff. 2 English teachers had just retired when I started teaching here. Another English teacher, Miss Shallow, retired this year. But the contract I'm about to sign will effectively deny me a secure future in this school because of a bizarre bureaucratic nightmare. The school want me here, and you, the students, seem to want me here, and I want to be here. If I go to a different school, which I don't want to do, I have to start my career all over again. And even though I've been teaching for 9 years, it will be at least another 5 years before I qualify for any kind of job security. Now, I'm not telling you my story because I think I'm special or because I think I'm perfect. I'm not. I make mistakes. And I'm not trying to get my story out there because I think I'm special. I've become visible because I've created a website that's turned out to be useful for thousands of students. But I'm just a regular teacher, and more than anything, I just want to teach. And there are so many non-permanent teachers up and down the country in the same position as me. The government want all of us, they want the public to believe that they haven't cut the pupil-teacher ratio, but this is a carefully crafted illusion. They've taken away the allowance for career guidance teachers, they've taken away the hours which were granted to schools who run the Leaving Cert vocational programme, they've abolished language support for non-nationals, they've reduced special needs hours, and they have introduced a redeployment system, which means that those who are already in the system can be moved around like pawns on a chessboard, and those of us who are non-permanent are non-existent. So much for a school as a community. Every time a teacher is redeployed, in most cases against their wishes, a non-permanent teacher loses their job. It seems that in our new low-cost education system, all teachers are equal, but some teachers are more equal than others. If I sound like I'm running for election, I apologise. God knows the last thing this country needs is another teacher up in the Dáil. I don't want to be a politician, I just want to teach. If you're wondering why non-permanent teachers aren't screaming about this from the rooftops, the simple answer is because we're afraid. Teachers aren't popular in this country. We're afraid to even say these things out loud because the government will try to use our complaints as an excuse to make things even worse for all teachers. If we make ourselves visible, we might lose our jobs. We're afraid that people will dismiss us as whingers because of our summer holidays. When people looked at me enviously when we finished up a few weeks ago, I didn't know what to say to them. I didn't tell them about the ball of anxiety in my stomach, wondering if my contract would be renewed, wondering how many hours I'd be granted for next year, wondering if my family and I would actually be better off to just abandon Ireland and set up homes somewhere else. So I become like Hamlet. And I say, I know that it is not, nor it cannot come to good, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. Well, I'm tired of saying nothing. Non-permanent teachers have to stop going quietly because our students and our schools are suffering. And because my English teacher told me that it's okay to rebel against stupidity and injustice. The department aren't interested in my situation or in our schools' difficulties. So I'm not naive here, I know that. Schools are like a maths equation to them. If you have your quota of allocated teachers to pupils, you just have to make it work somehow. Well, I have an exam question for the Education Minister, Rory Quinn. If he'd like to come down here and tell us exactly how it's possible to timetable 475 pupils for English with just 2 permanent teachers, he's more than welcome. The project maths teachers would be delighted, because this is the kind of real-world problem that the Minister insists he wants students to get to grips with. Of course, sadly, we know Rory Quinn has no intention of paying us a visit. Both he and our Taoiseach Enda Kenny were invited to attend these awards weeks ago, long before the judges made their decision, long before I was the person who won, and they both declined. The irony of this isn't lost on me either. No one in power seems in the slightest bit interested in encouraging, celebrating and recognising good teaching. Their solution would most likely be to redeploy someone else into my job and leave me on the dole. And believe me, I know right now there are hundreds of thousands of highly capable and qualified people in this country who are unemployed. My husband is one of them. But if you care about education, you should want the hundreds of teachers up and down this country who are losing their jobs to be kept in the system. You should want there to be opportunities for the thousands and thousands of people who are training to be teachers, and the only hope they have of getting employment is to leave. And some of you probably want to be a teacher, and it saddens me to say I wouldn't recommend it. In this country, we are proud of our national sports, hurling and football, but as a teacher for nearly a decade, I'd humbly propose we add teacher bashing to the list. It's a measure, I suppose, of the passion Irish people have for education, that nothing irritates us more than a teacher who we feel is unfit to teach. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and I'd like to think that the people who are entrusted to educate her for the next 15 years will be good at what they do and will take it seriously. But despite our national obsession with criticising teachers, I need to point out that the majority of teachers who teach you, the majority of teachers in this country, they are good at what they do. And they do take it seriously. And when my daughter Hazel goes to school, that doesn't mean that I'll agree with every decision her teachers make. It doesn't mean that I'll necessarily agree with their style of teaching. Crucially, it doesn't mean that I can measure the effectiveness of what teachers do by looking at exam results. They've tried this in the UK and America, and it has completely undermined the education system, it has undermined students, it has undermined teachers to the extent that most teachers leave the profession within 3 years. Is that what we want for our country? Measuring teacher effectiveness by exam results only aggravates the problem of teaching to the test, instead of offering students a real education, and that's a problem we're already all too familiar with in this country. What I'd really like for us to do as a country, though, is to have a different conversation. Have a positive conversation. You know me, I'm not a negative person. So let's talk about good teaching. My whole life, parents, friends, college lecturers, even fellow teachers have tried to persuade me that I'm wasting my talents being a teacher. But why can't being a teacher be as prestigious as being a doctor? A good doctor saves people. A good teacher inspires them. The fact of the matter is, if we want teachers to be proud of in this country, we need to make it a profession that you would be proud to be part of. Instead of attacking teachers and tearing their morale to shreds, we should be asking, what makes a good teacher? And what makes a good teacher great? We should ask, how can we keep attracting good teachers to the profession? And when they've been in the profession for a few years, how can we stop them from leaving teaching? How can we help our teachers to get better at what they do? instead of always simply criticising them. And we should, of course, ask, what about you, our students? What do you want to learn? How do you want to learn? Do you want to learn? And what can we do to make this happen? We should try to figure out the working conditions that make it possible for people to become the best teachers that they can possibly be. I teach over 200 pupils. How can I possibly give all of them the individual attention that I know that they need? Why do you think I argue so passionately against cutbacks? Is it because I'm lazy, as some people would suggest? Or is it because cutbacks make all teachers worse at their job, through no fault of their own? The reason grinds are so popular in this country isn't because the teachers are rubbish. Who do you think are giving the grinds? It's because the ideal pupil-teacher ratio is 1 to 1. We've known this since Socrates taught Plato, and he taught Aristotle, and he in turn taught Alexander the Great. When we elected this government, they proclaimed, and I'm going to quote here because I'm an English teacher, so I'm a fan of quotes, that even in our country's crisis, we can make progress in education and protect frontline services. They promised to recruit, train, and support the highest calibre of teachers. Well, I don't feel very supported, and nor do the talented and experienced teachers up and down the country whose jobs are disappearing. Not to mention new entrants to the profession, who thanks to pay cuts, become like second-class citizens in our staff rooms. I guess what I'm asking is if the government mean it when they talk about supporting good teaching, or is it just more doublespeak? Obviously, I have a personal agenda here. I want to save my job. But I don't have a political agenda. My grandfather was a proud Fine Gaeler, and I have many friends in the Labour Party. I want to believe that Fine Gael and Labour can find a way to be better than the idiots who got us into this mess in the first place. And some positive things are happening in education, even though you don't read about that much either. Our Minister for Education, Rory Quinn, is determined to bring about changes in our, in many ways, antiquated educational system, and for this I admire him. The proposals for the new junior cert have the potential to bring about real and meaningful change, but they need to listen to the voice of the teachers. And that's a change that I want to be part of. But we need to make sure we're making things better, not worse. Destroying the morale of the teachers who will be implementing this change is not the way forward. If Minister Quinn takes time out of his busy schedule to listen to anything I've had to say, he will no doubt throw his hands in the air and say, there is no money. Well, I say to Rory Quinn and the Department of Education, if this is the limit of your imagination, creativity and passion to protect our children's education, shame on you. Finally, I want to apologise to my students. I should be putting every ounce of my energy, my passion, and my enthusiasm into my teaching and your learning next year. Instead, I'll be battling with the department, trying to force them to recognise that I am needed in this school. I'll be distracted from doing my best for my students by the fear that someone else will be parachuted into my job, and by the fear that I will have to consider emigrating to support my family and to continue doing the job that I love. And for this, I apologise. You, the students, deserve better. Thank you.